It's going fine here. Mike, you know.
Yes, Mike. I'm already messing it up.
Yeah.
Yes, I am Mike. I like Mike.
Okay, perfect. Because we don't call Michael Mike, so this works out great. So how's it going over there in Hawaii?
Well, it's unusually cool for this time of year. Otherwise, it's alternating between showers and sun, and we're getting into tourist weather. It's tourist season, but they won't let us shoot any of them. I understand they taste like chicken, and in this economy, that may become an issue.
So you said it's a little cool over there. So what's up? No global warming?
Not here, and certainly not across many parts of the United States. They've got actually frost warnings in a lot of states for tonight. They're getting more snow around Las Vegas and California, Big Bear. All these tourist areas were getting ready to start their springtime and summer activities. They're having to delay them. So, yeah, I'm afraid this whole global warming thing really didn't work out quite the way Al Gore wanted it to.
Yep.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So when is everything going to melt?
Well, it will sometime, but very obviously, the reality is the Earth has been cooling for about 12, 13 years now. The Arctic ice caps are increasing, and unfortunately, the people who are pushing this global warming situation, they're driven partly by the desire to sell us products, agendas, carbon taxes, carbon credits, and partly by the fact that they've bet their reputations on this human-caused global warming, and they're trying to figure a way where they can somehow get out of this without looking like they were part of, at the very most generous, a horrendous scientific goof, or more realistically, they were part of this agenda to take something that happens naturally, claim it was all the fault of human beings to guilt us out of money and obedience.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, people are waking up, I would assume, by now. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't assume much.
Don't assume that completely, because we still have people that think the Earth is flat.
Yeah. This is true. Mike, I don't know if you've been with us since that last time, but we've been doing a lot of debating with flat earthers. There's a lot of people who believe the Earth is actually flat.
Boy, that's a tough one to get into, and I understand that the Bible teaches that, but I sort of hope that we'd evolved past that stage.
Yes. We did too, until about a month ago.
You sure it's not somebody pulling your ankle?
Oh, no.
No. These people are dead serious. We thought that they were at first, but no, they're really they're serious. We actually did a show. Not that I wanted to give it a lot of attention, but we ended up doing a show, and we had a physicist come on, and we talked about it with him. So, and I put that up on YouTube, and so people that go and search for flat Earth, they come to that, and it's mostly these flat earthers that are coming up. So there's like probably there's like, I don't know, 50 or 60 dislikes compared to like maybe like 10 likes on the video right now.
That's definitely a little bit out there, and that's definitely out there. But unfortunately, people can be slaves to belief. It's a big issue. That's what's driving a lot of the adherence to the global warming agenda. A lot of Hillary's support is just from people who believe that she's whatever it is she pretends to be.
I believe she's psychotic.
Sociopathic. Right. I'll go as far as sociopathic, and sociopaths unfortunately make very, very good, convincing liars and wonderful politicians.
Yep.
That they do. Wow. So
Fast Track was today.
Fast Track. That's right. Yeah.
Yes. Yesterday.
It got declined, right?
Nah, it did originally.
No.
Then the Democrats came up with a compromise situation, and yeah, it's now moving forward. Now, it may be fast-tracked here in the United States where Congress just doesn't want to be bothered with the negotiations, just like they don't want to be bothered declaring war, but by golly, they want to be involved in the possibility that we might make peace with Iran. But it's still a long ways away from actually getting the treaty signed by all these other nations who are part of this, mostly because there's a lot of stuff that's been added in there. A lot of nations are very concerned about the loss of sovereignty, their own governmental functions being transferred literally to corporate bodies. A lot of the countries are very bothered by some of the amendments that were put in there regarding GMO labeling. The TPP and the TTIP both basically ban GMO labeling. Israel's trying to get this treaty to include a ban on the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement around the world. And it's meeting a lot of resistance. And the U.S. is trying to arm twist people to go along with it, because the ultimate goal of all of these treaties is the U.S. is desperate to try and lock the world back into a U.S.-dominated economic system, similar to Bretton Woods in the post-World War II years, or the world under the petrodollar, before the U.S. dollar really starts to come apart, at which point everybody's just going to head for the exits and not want to be part of this any longer. But we're at a situation where the U.S. is trying to basically get the world back to the Bretton Woods-like agreement, where it doesn't matter what happens to the dollar because the rest of the world is locked to the dollar. But I think a lot of the other countries are not going to go for it. Certainly Russia and China are adamant they are not going to sign on to any economic agreement that basically cedes their sovereignty to the United States or the United States corporations.
Oh, yeah, the dollar is tanking. I keep thinking it's going to be the bottom, but it just keeps going down. So, I mean...
Well, remember, in a currency war, they're actually trying to lower its value, but the U.S. is losing the currency war, and it's getting pretty desperate out there right now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. It almost seems like the euro is overpowering the dollar, or is it about to?
Well, not the euro so much. The euro and the dollar have been sort of maintaining parity all along. The real problem is the rise of the ruble, the renminbi, and the yuan, which are very powerful currencies, and you've got all these parallel financial systems being set up, like BRICS and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and they're all basically operating outside the U.S. dollar. And that, of course, means that Wall Street does not get a piece of the action. See, at the end of World War II, the U.S. government's price to Great Britain to bring the American people into World War II was that the British pound sterling would surrender its role as the global trade and banking currency and allow the dollar to take over. Now, back during World War II, when accounts were still being settled with bullion or boxes of paper notes, it did make sense to have a single global currency that everybody could rely on. In these days of global instantaneous financial transactions, it's really an obsolete concept. But what happened is the United States made a huge amount of money just being the global currency, because before anybody could conduct commerce across a border, they would first have to come to the Federal Reserve and borrow dollars at interest, or they would have to bring manufactured goods and agricultural produce to the United States to get those ink and paper tickets. And so literally the U.S. was making a huge profit off the fact that the dollar was the global trade and banking currency. And over the subsequent decades, Wall Street got kind of lazy. They started saying, we don't need to manufacture, we don't need to grow food. We can let all the high-paying jobs go to other countries because we're making this guaranteed income from Bretton Woods. Then Nixon ended gold convertibility, which technically was the end of Bretton Woods, and the U.S. went out and they established the petrodollar deal, where the U.S. went to all the resource-rich oil companies, mostly in the Middle East, and they said, we'll make you a deal. As long as you sell your oil only for U.S. dollars and invest those dollars in the U.S., we will guarantee your military safety. And so once again, the world had to come borrow dollars at interest in order to buy oil, or bring us products and agricultural produce for those ink and paper tickets before they could buy oil. And that deal kept global demand for the dollar high up until recently. But starting back basically at the turn of the millennium, a lot of countries started saying there's no reason for us to have a single global currency. And in 2002, Iraq got permission from the United Nations to start selling Iraq's oil for the euro. 1 year later, the United States, screaming weapons of mass destruction, invades Iraq, lynches Saddam Hussein, puts in a new puppet government, and Iraq's oil is on the world market, but only for the U.S. dollar. Over in Libya, you had Muammar Gaddafi shut down their private central bank, set up a state bank with a brand new value-based currency, the gold dinar. Then he announced to the world that Libya's oil was for sale, but only for the gold dinar. The U.S. invades, they kill Gaddafi, they put in a private central bank, the gold for the gold dinar. Nobody knows where that went, and Libya's oil is back on the world market, but only for the dollar. And that's really what's driving a lot of this war agenda, to just keep all global commerce going through the U.S. dollar, from which Wall Street and the Federal Reserve make a huge amount of money. And unfortunately, we're starting to see all these parallel systems start up. BRICS, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and the U.S. is trying to stop that with these transoceanic treaties. And they're running into a lot of resistance. And frankly, the only thing the United States has got to negotiate with is, you go along with us on the treaty, or we'll overthrow your government the way we did Kiev, put in a puppet ruler, and your successor will do what we want. And that's what's brought this world right literally to the edge of a nuclear world war.
You just broke it down exactly the way it is. Yeah.
I guess I have a question. You said the Russian ruble is getting stronger, but I thought it went down 50%. I think it was these last couple months.
It went down briefly because the U.S. and Saudi Arabia put together this little deal to crush world oil prices. And Russia's economy, export economy, is very heavily into oil and gas, and it did harm Russia's ruble, but it kind of backflashed against United States oil companies. A lot of fracking companies went out of business. Canada's oil company was suffering huge losses. Venezuela has been put to the edge of bankruptcy by this. And Russia's economy is already rebounding from the sanctions. So is Iran's, because there are way too many countries on planet Earth who are just willing to ignore what the U.S. wants and continue to carry out commerce. You've even got Boeing in the United States and Germany starting to do business with Iran again. And pretty much all of Europe is saying it's time for these Russian sanctions to go. They're hurting us more than they hurt the Russians. It's just the U.S. out there trying to throw its weight around and bully everybody into going back to the 1950s when, again, the United States and the dollar was the center of all global commerce.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So pretty much the ruble recovered a little, did it?
Yeah, it has. They're actually doing very well over there.
Nice.
So what do you think their plans are for the dollar? Are they just trying to make it stronger? Try to, like you said, some sort of new Bretton Woods agreement?
Well, the Bretton Woods agreement is to basically lock all of the world's economies back to the dollar. So it doesn't matter whether the dollar goes up or down, because everybody else's currencies will go up and down with it together. These other currencies are pegged to the dollar. The exchange rates are locked that way. And that's what the original Bretton Woods did. But I don't think they're going to be able to get enough nations to come on board where it's really going to do much of anything except isolate the United States and those who signed the treaty from the rest of the world's economy. And, Asia is booming up, huge manufacturing capacity over there. Russia, they're able to run their economies without the United States, and that is really the part that is considered a threat to the United States, is you have countries around the world doing business with each other without going through the dollar. China has signed 8 direct currency exchange agreements with other nations, including Russia, and amazingly Australia. Even Australia is saying, we don't need to go through the dollar to do business with China. And because the United States financial system stopped thinking of itself as a manufacturing and agricultural power and saw itself merely as the financier to the world, they've become dependent on that mafia-like piece of the action from everybody else's commerce, and that's why they're willing to start initiating wars to drag the world back to the way it was in the 1950s. And they're meeting a tremendous amount of resistance.
Hmm. So what happens next, Mike?
Well, we're almost in a bit of a race between the U.S. actually getting a major war with peer nations going or the implosion of the U.S. economy. And obviously, from the point of view of the government and Wall Street, they would like to see a major war because then they got somebody to blame the mess on. If the U.S. economy implodes and Wall Street and Washington, D.C. don't have somebody to blame, the American people are going to point the finger of blame where it truly deserves to be: corrupt Wall Street money junkies and their lackeys in the United States government. And the United States has a history. Every time they get into one of these self-created financial hotspots, they get out of it, or at least distract from it, with a world war. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008. Look how many nations the United States has invaded, bombed, drone-struck, or tried to overthrow.
Oh yeah, it looks like we're headed towards a war now. I mean, and then you got oil. Price of oil looks like it's going to start going back up in the next month.
Yeah.
So I mean, it usually seems to coincide with that, and we'll see. I mean, do you think the conspiracy theories about the government wanting to do a one world currency are in any way legitimate?
Oh, absolutely, because the private central bankers have always wanted the entire world underneath their system. And any nation that tries to operate without a private central bank gets attacked. And this has been going on for hundreds of years. Over at my website, whatreallyhappened.com, I have an article in the permanent menu up at the top called All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. It's a very popular article. Some of the fans have literally made videos around it. And it points out that all of these wars can be explained as a contest between the private central bankers wanting to keep their debt enslavement mechanism versus those countries trying to break free. The American Revolution was actually fought to free the United States from the Bank of England, which was a private central bank that issued all the public currencies alone at interest. And as soon as the revolution was over, the bankers were in the United States trying to bribe members of the government, trying to get a new private central bank, and they succeeded. The first Bank of the United States, primarily through the help of Alexander Hamilton, who was always the banker's man inside the young United States. And the first Bank of the United States had a 20-year charter, and at the end of the charter, anybody could see that the bank had simply gathered to itself all the real wealth of the nation and put it in their pockets and impoverished everybody else. So Congress refused to renew the charter. The Rothschilds actually threatened the United States government, if you do not renew our charter, we will start a war with you. Congress stood firm, and the Rothschilds went to King George III and said, we will finance a new war against the American colonies at virtually zero interest so you can bring them back to colonial status. And that was the cause of the War of 1812. So even though the United States won the War of 1812, it so bankrupted them they were forced to accept a new private central bank, the Second Bank of the United States, which had a 20-year charter. And at the end of that 20 years, President Andrew Jackson ran for his second term on the slogan, Jackson and no bank. And he was adamant he was going to shut that second private bank down, and he did. And by the way, he's the only American president to ever pay off the national debt. And as soon as he succeeded in shutting down the Second Bank of the United States as a central bank, there was an immediate assassination attempt on him, which failed when both pistols failed to fire. The Second Bank of the United States tried to run as a normal depositor bank, but went out of business in about 2 years. Because depositor banks that you are familiar with on Main Street, USA, and these central banks are two completely different operations. Private central banks are legalized counterfeiting operations where they create money out of thin air, loan it into circulation at interest, and then just sit back and reap the profits from it. And they only exist because in every government there's always some group of people who can be bought and bribed to sell their people back into the slavery of that system. That's what happened in the United States a little over 100 years ago, when a corrupted president and a corrupted Congress sold the American people back into the exact same type of predatory banking system we fought a revolution to break free of. It was supposed to be called the Third Bank of the United States, but at the last minute they changed it to the Federal Reserve, figuring the name federal would fool people into thinking it was part of the U.S. government. But it isn't. It's no more federal than Federal Express.
Right.
Well said.
Michael, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin?
I think I think any currency operating outside the central banks is a good idea. We've seen Bitcoin come under attack. The Federal Reserve is jealous over its monopoly for public currency, even though they're not allowed to have a monopoly under U.S. law. We are legally allowed to decide for ourselves what medium of exchange we're going to use. But we've seen the U.S. government come down on like the Ron Paul dollar and the Liberty dollar, and they're trying to basically discredit and destroy Bitcoin because they do not want us using currency on which we are not paying interest to the Federal Reserve. I'll give you a little history about the John F. Kennedy assassination. We all know that the Warren Commission was a big lie. And we know there were a lot of people who hated John F. Kennedy. One group that hated him was the Federal Reserve, because Kennedy signed an executive order, Executive Order 11110, that started issuing from the United States Treasury a new currency called the United States Note, based on value, based on silver in Fort Knox, and he put about $4.5 billion into circulation, which powered American commerce without generating interest payments to the Federal Reserve. 5 months later, Kennedy was shot dead in Dealey Plaza, Dallas, Texas, and on the Warren Commission sat John J. McCloy, president of the Chase Manhattan Bank, president of the World Bank. And I don't care how good a banker he is, he's not qualified to be investigating the murder of a president. Therefore, he was on the Warren Commission to make sure the link between the assassination and the financial sector remained hidden.
Wow. How about that? Never even saw that. Well, that's pretty cool.
You know, the guy who shot at Andrew Jackson, you know, when they said, "Why'd you do it?" He said, "Well, with Jackson dead, money would be more plenty." We know that Lincoln was assassinated after announcing he was going to keep his greenbacks in circulation that he'd used to finance the Civil War without selling the North into the debt slavery of the banks again.
That's right. Yeah. So, to get to this one world currency, what do they have to do at this point? Do they have to destroy the dollar, or do they want to destroy the dollar?
I think to get to the one world currency, they're going to have to convince all the people of the world that there needs to be a single economic system, a single central bank. That's going to be a hard sell. Obviously, if there is a global financial crash, the carpetbaggers are going to be standing up and saying, we've got a brand new global economic system all set to go. All you have to do is sign on the dotted line and we'll be good to go. And obviously we don't want to do that. They're just going to be restarting the same system again, and it's a system of debt slavery, because the way private central banks are designed, they generate more debt than money with which to pay the debt. You can never get rid of that debt, no matter how hard you work, no matter how much you sacrifice. The debt grows and grows until it destroys your country, like Greece, or your planet, like Earth. And this is not about money and wealth. It's about ruling the human race through the illusion of debt, rule by a banker. And it's no more legitimate a form of governance than rule by divine right or rule by slavery. And like those former failed systems, it only works as long as people allow themselves to be brainwashed into thinking, into believing this is the way the world is supposed to be. And you will notice that after the Federal Reserve came into being, our public schools stopped teaching about King George III's Currency Act and the Bank of England being the primary cause of the revolution. It was, it's tea in Boston Harbor and it's all this other stuff here.
So you say it's going to be a hard sell, or it would be a hard sell, meaning other countries aren't going to go for it?
Well, when you surrender control of your monetary system, you're literally surrendering a huge part of your sovereignty and independence. And I think most people are going to say, well, if we're having to go to just one bank, we're, for all intents and purposes, that is the New World Order, and that is the goal of the New World Order: one bank, one planet, one people, living perpetually in debt slavery.
Right. But I can see it being kind of an easy sell. Make it sound wonderful.
I think most people,
like a utopia, global utopia.
Well, look how badly. I mean, these are the same people who've messed up the global economy to this point over the last 100 years. And I think most people are going to say, we're not going to give you a second chance here. Let's go back to having little coins made out of valuable metal in our pockets, and we'll work out our commerce for ourselves. Because if you don't have control over your own money, then you're already a slave. And ever since 1913, the Federal Reserve has been taking away control of your money from you. When the United States was started, the dollar was a weight measure of silver. That silver was the dollar. The paper notes weren't the money. They were a claim check for convenience, but you could take that paper note to the bank and get $1 worth of silver for a dollar note anytime you wanted. Then they got rid of the silver standard, and they started convincing everybody that that paper note was the money. And once they were able to do that and delink it from silver, we've seen the value of the dollar decline to the point where a U.S. dollar today is worth about 7 cents compared to the dollar as it existed at the start of the Federal Reserve. Right. And now they want to take away your ability to even have your money in your own pocket. We're already hearing all this talk about a cashless society where all the money is the property of the banks. It's always in the bank. You've got a little card that just moves it from one bank to another bank, but you're never allowed to have money in your pocket any longer.
A chip in your hand.
You think that would take a lot of the drug business out? Like, because they do mostly cash transactions.
I don't think it would slow the drug business one tiny bit because people can always buy things for barter.
Buy things,
and
right.
let's be honest, most of the drug traffic right now in this country is being run by the Central Intelligence Agency. And so, at this point, they'll always find a way to make it pay. There may be a cashless society for us in the city streets, but there's still going to be gold bars and coins and silver and jewels that can be used as medium of exchange for the big crimes, and they're untraceable.
Sure.
Yep. Yeah, so they have the cartels pushing the drugs, I would imagine, and so
yeah,
go after whoever gets property.
Okay, you were breaking up then. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Jeff, you were breaking up. We didn't hear what you said. Well, speaking of the financial collapse, I guess we could move on to this Jade Helm situation that's going on. We've talked a little bit about it, and I've heard a lot of different crazy stuff about it, conspiracy theories. Like the one that really gets me is the Walmart death camps. But
yeah, that's a little out there, and what you need to remember is when the public is getting onto an issue, the government likes to employ a propaganda tactic called poisoning the well, in which they will go out and plant some utter nonsense in order to discredit the entire conversation. I'll give you a good example. When the House Select Committee on Assassinations was taking another look at the assassination of John F. Kennedy, they made a big deal about the so-called umbrella man who'd been standing next to the motorcade route with an open umbrella, and they said, oh, it's a poison dart gun, and it paralyzed Kennedy, and that's why he couldn't move out of the shots. And they got the umbrella in there, and they opened it up and showed it's just an umbrella and said, oh, see, it's just, don't point that thing at me, just to make fun of the whole issue. But thanks to the audio data, in the end, the House Select Committee was forced to acknowledge that, yes, there had been multiple shooters in Dealey Plaza, and there was, therefore, actually a conspiracy.
Oh, well said. So, yeah, I agree. That's how I think of it, and it's a good way of putting poisoning the well. And I kind of saw through that right away, and I saw how people were just making fun of the whole Walmart thing, and kind of just forgetting the.
You're breaking up again, Jeff.
Okay, well, let me talk about the Walmart situation. Yeah. Walmart, as you know, was dealing with, for lack of a better word, an employee insurrection. And as a result of it and the public attention that was created, they had to raise wages for their workers. Well, if you look at the Walmarts that were announced that they were being closed without warning because of plumbing problems, those are the very stores where the protests began. So this was Walmart just, getting back at the workers who had started this whole push for higher wages by closing the stores and letting them all go.
Okay.
So that's what's going on with that situation. But the people who are...
And nothing more? No, they're not Walmart death camps then?
No. That's being put out there. that's being put out there deliberately to make people who are concerned about Jade Helm look like nutcases and kooks.
Yes.
In fact, that's the term they use, kookification. That's a propaganda term. Now, what
we've all been saying that.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I do think it is, in this case, just a training exercise and a bit of a showing off to the American people about, how big and tough the government can be if they want to be. And the reason I think it's only an exercise is because it's only taking place in 10 states, although I think Colorado just pulled out of it. They couldn't do a takeover in just 10 states because the other 40 states would immediately start, arming their borders here. But we do need to be concerned about what it is they're training to do, which is house-to-house searches, rounding up people, putting them in camps very clearly. This is a rehearsal by the United States government to declare war on the American people. And we should be concerned about that. We should be focused on that aspect of it and not get distracted off by all these wild stories about, stacks of coffins hidden in the back of the Walmart and the rest of it.
Now, do you think it's a little bit of, what's the right word for it? Getting us used to it,
I don't know that they're going to get us used to it. I think most people who are looking at it are absolutely appalled at what's going on. And I don't see them as being comfortable with it. There are a lot of people who are already angry about it. Some of them are letting their imaginations get the better of them. But, yeah.
Certainly. Well, and I can see him as being like conditioning, just more conditioning, That's why I agree with you as far as I think it's probably just a training exercise, but I believe a lot of it is conditioning, getting us used to them being able to do this all the time. And there is people that are angry about it and pissed off, and with good reason, and should be. But realistically, there's a whole hell of a lot of people that aren't, and very docile and could care less too. So
I would be very cautious about mistaking silence for consent. For one thing,
good point.
Most Americans understand that U.S. Army in the streets of America is a violation of posse comitatus. Now, of course, the government's position is this is just a training exercise. It's not for real. Therefore, it's okay for the Army to be in the streets. But we also know there's another area of concern we need to pay attention to, and that is that every time there's one of these false flag terror attacks, there's always a drill taking place at exactly the same time, which provides cover for getting assets in and out of the area and make sure that the environment is completely controlled when it all goes down. When 9/11 happened, FEMA had been on the ground in New York from the day before, practicing a scenario of hijacked aircraft crashing into buildings. Right. During the 7/7 subway bombing in London, there was an ongoing security drill about backpack bombs left on the train. There was a similar backpack bomb drill taking place when the Boston bombing took place.
Right.
We know now that during this recent incident down in Garland, Texas, SWAT teams were already in place when these two would-be shooters came in through the lobby. And since it was all over and done with for 15 seconds, you have to ask, okay, what was SWAT doing there? Well, there was a drill going on. And so we need to be very careful if in the middle of one of these drills there's a big bang and all of a sudden the drill starts to go live, and that's obviously something that a lot of people are very, very concerned about.
Sure. And there's at the same aspect is where you get a lot of people that are taking off with very wild conspiracy theories. So, which again, I understand the worry, but you got to be, realistic. Realistic at the same time.
Yeah, so. we do have to be realistic. Okay.
So, yeah, definitely. But I can see the concern, of course. I'm concerned about it. I don't think it's right.
It's good to be aware.
And you're 100% about. There's a whole lot of people that are very silent, that aren't like us, that talk about it on a daily and whatnot. But I try to talk to a lot of people, coworkers. I deal with the public, and I don't know. There's just a lot of people that are blind to. I mean, they don't even know about our dollar. Say nothing about everything else.
Well, they're just caught in the rat race. They got no time to think about this.
Well, my experience is a little different because as I go around, I as an experiment, I'll talk to people at the supermarket.
Right. Yeah. Me too.
And when you start talking and bringing the stuff up, you will find they're pretty clued in. They're pretty clued into what's going on.
Okay. All right. Maybe geographically, it's. So I find a little bit of the opposite. Sometimes they get shocked. Sometimes I love it when I get totally floored and I bring it up to a little old lady or something, and we start talking in line at the grocery store and get blown away by her. I've had that happen. Well, there's something fishy about that 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's more people willing to entertain these ideas. It's not becoming crazy. It's becoming mainstream. And we're just, we're going to be accepting these types of things in the future, I think.
Well, I think that's a big problem.
So you a little bit too much hope there. So this isn't going to take 100 years to play out then, is it? This seems to be coming into fruition in our lifetime.
Well, I certainly don't see how the economy is going to make it to the end of the year. I mean, Greece is basically out of money. They've got more of these payments coming up to the Troika. They can't possibly make it. The bankers can't hide the fact that Greece is not making the payments. There are trillions in dollars of credit default swaps that were purchased against Greece's debt that are going to come due. And even though Wall Street has indicated that they're just going to pretend that they aren't really defaults, the people holding those defaults are not going to go along with that. And so I think one of the reasons the U.S. government is practicing all of these military takeover tactics is because it's not going to hold together much longer. It can't. When Greece goes, you're going to see a lot of other nations in Europe are going to start talking about leaving the Eurozone. Portugal and Italy are already talking about leaving the Eurozone. There are trillions of dollars in credit default swaps sold across all of Europe's debt. And when that starts to come apart, those people are going to be pounding on the doors of Wall Street, wanting their money. Wall Street doesn't have it because derivatives are not regulated. They don't have to maintain cash reserves. Wall Street will turn around to the federal government and say, please, we need another bailout. We meant well. And the U.S. government will turn to the American people and say, we need another few $1 trillion from you. And the American people are going to say, we don't have it. And that's when things are going to get ugly.
Yeah, I was just listening to some people today talk about how we're in another housing bubble, and it's about to pop, and you're going to be able to buy houses for 10 cents on the dollar again.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be quite that low, but unfortunately, you need to understand the Wall Street sharpsters love volatility. They love bubbles because that's how the giant fortunes are made in a very, very short amount of time. And because Wall Street didn't have to pay the losses from the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud in 2008, they had no reason not to go and start doing it again.
Right.
They're bundling student loans. They're bundling car insurance. They're even bundling home security contracts. And they're once again out there. They're now doing subprime auto loans. They're doing exactly what they did before because they made a fortune and they dumped the losses on the American taxpayer.
Sure.
And that, of course, is fascism.
And there's very, very bad money going again, being lent again. I know what I wanted to ask you. So you're saying by the end of the year. Is that what you had said?
Yeah, yes, I don't see us able to reach the end of the year without a major economic implosion. I hear a lot of people talking about September. Well, it's hard to be a prognosticator because we're all trying to make our forecasts and predictions on the basis of the rules, but the other side is constantly changing the rules, and they have those printing presses that they can run whenever they need to try and cover things up. But it's a rock and a hard place situation because the more the Federal Reserve runs those printing presses, the more the rest of the world wants to drop using the dollar. And then you have the U.S. government saying, if you dare drop the U.S. dollar, we will come in and bomb you.
Seems to be what's going on. So, World War III coming up, potentially.
Actually, I think we're already in it. I think we're already in it.
That's what I said. I'm pretty sure.
Can it be stopped before the climax, then?
Really?
That's what I'm trying to do. I've been trying to head this thing off for 21 years now, and you know, it's going to come right down to the wire, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Well,
that's not very optimistic.
Well, if you wanted optimism, you know.
Come on, man.
Can we sugarcoat this a little bit?
You and your
I don't think so.
No point in that.
Oh, I guess not.
You know, realistic is better than optimistic.
I agree.
You know, you be optimistic about the aftermath. I mean, will we spring up from it? Will we win in the end? I mean, I just hope it doesn't get to the climax and hundreds of millions of people don't die.
I like to be cynical and optimistic at the same time.
Oh, that's a heck of a juggling act.
He does it. I see him do it all the time.
Well, I'll tell you what. What I see happening in the United States is going to be a repeat of what happened to the former Soviet Union, where the central government just collapses from corruption, financial mismanagement, the accumulation of their own lies, and there'll be about maybe 4 months of really hard times when we're all going to have to take care of each other and look out for each other, because there's going to be nobody out there to do that. And then we'll form a new republic, and things will be better. That's what happened in the Soviet Union. They crashed it. 4 rough months. The new Russian republics are out there. I mean, they're leaving us in the dust with their space program. They're getting ready to go to Mars. We can't even get our own people up to the space station anymore.
Only 4 months. This sounds beautiful. A new republic.
It does.
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Oh.
Please.
Well, that's our best outcome. That's our best.
Certainly.
I have 4 months of food right now.
I'm with Jeff though. It sounds so good. Like, you know, just get it over with, and us that have been preparing.
6 months of food. The cats all have 6 months of food. We'll be fine.
Right.
And then you eat the cats.
Oh,
they need the cat.
I hope not. I just hope not. I hope it doesn't get that bad. It's not going to get that bad.
Well, we'll start with the members of Congress, because they taste like chicken, and they're not radioactive, and you know.
Yeah. So worst case scenario, we live out in the woods. There's a lake nearby. I would go fishing and hunting first, of course.
Okay, since we're being realistic, and that's obviously best case scenario. What's worst case scenario? I would send half of us to FEMA camps, and
well, a lot of people like to talk about that, but if the U.S. government puts us in FEMA camps, that they're going to have to take care of us somehow, and we're not going to be available to work in the farms and factories and fields here. Now, I have no doubt that probably some certain individuals will be targeted, but this idea that we're all going to be in the camps, that's a little out there, which is why when Poroshenko started talking about throwing the ethnic Russians in concentration camps in Ukraine, a lot of people are beginning to think he's lost his sanity over there.
Okay.
Yeah, I fear something like that will happen. We're going to have an economic collapse, and then everyone who's starving out in the streets will be gathered and put into camps, and then we'll have a economic workforce that can finally compete with China again.
Well, the problem with that, we competed successfully with China because we were leaders in technology. But during that whole transition where Wall Street said we don't need to bother with manufacturing, they started basically selling the technology off to other countries. And they allowed these other countries to take over the technological lead. And those countries are never going to let it go back. The only way we could really restore America is we need a new civilian technology incubator, because the prosperity of the 70s, 80s, and 90s all track back to the race to the moon, which created all these new technologies, which led to all these new products, and America could compete with China because we had the patents on those technologies and those products. And then they got sold off. And it's like they strip mined the intellectual property of our country, sold it off to Asia, and then they're wondering why the manufacturing jobs aren't here any longer.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. I mean, so what do you how do you think activists are doing? And are we on the right track? Are most activists focused on the right things that we need to counter all the wrong things out there? TPP, for instance. Should we be focused on that more so than net neutrality or
global warming?
Well, we could get lost in the fine details, and that's actually part of what the government would like to see happen, where we're all arguing over was there a plane at the Pentagon and so forth. I think it's time for us all to step back and agree on the one thing we can all agree on. We live under a government that lies to us about pretty much everything. And we need to make that decision. Are we willing to live with a government that lies to us, to control us, to steal our wealth, to send our children off to wars of conquest? Are we willing to let our children grow up in a country with a government that lies to the extent this one does? And I think we can all pretty much come together around that one concept. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about human-caused global warming or vaccines are safe or GMO is healthy or the unemployment number is only 5.6. We know it's all lies. We're hard-pressed to find anything the government has told us the truth about. In fact, my theory is the government doesn't dare tell the truth even once out of fear we might learn how to tell the difference.
Good point. Wow, yeah.
No, absolutely. Sure.
Professional liars.
So, any chance? I'm going back to the FEMA camps and such. Any chance there's a setup for dissidents, and they have a plan for, they have this all planned out and know exactly what's going to happen. And
well, if you look at how well their plans have gone so far in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Yemen, I wouldn't worry.
Okay.
I mean, they don't exactly have a stellar record of actually being able to carry their plans out. They're going to cause a lot of damage. They're going to hurt a lot of people. There's no question about it. I'm convinced that all of this race baiting that's out there is an attempt to get nationwide race riots as an excuse to declare national emergency and martial law and say, we got to take the guns away from everybody. But so far, they haven't been able to get that to work either. And they've tried it with Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman.
Mm-hmm.
They tried it in Ferguson. They tried it with Freddie Gray. And they're not getting the traction because the black people are just as smart as the white people, and we all realize that's what the government wants.
And another big thing is the alternative media. I don't care what anybody says. Other people are looking outside of. They're realizing that the TV's are lies.
Right. And speaking of, I'll bring this up while you just said that, Mark. Is now we got the mainstream media starting to report some things that they normally wouldn't report, like this stuff with recently with Bin Laden. Finally, something's been printed. I think it was NBC recognized that Obama was lying about the Osama bin Laden, the raid or whatever, because we know that was bullshit.
Really?
And he died back in 2001, right, Mike?
2001, December of 2001, natural causes, kidney problems.
Yes.
Guy was on dialysis.
Absolutely, exactly.
Yep.
Yes.
Now, Harvard University...
He didn't live for so many years after. He died years before. Years before. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, Wag the Dead Guy was basically what it is. Harvard University just did a survey, and they found that in the American population age 18 to 29, which is a major advertising demographic because they have the most disposable income. They're making money, but they're not saddled up with a bunch of debt yet. Only 2% of Americans in that demographic think the corporate media is being truthful and accurate. Only 2%. And that is absolutely stunning. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons why everybody's screaming that they've got to outlaw politically incorrect speech because they're finally realizing that with the independent media, the blogs and the Internet out here, they can't lie with impunity to the people anymore. And if they can't do that, they don't know any other way to run a government than lies, fraud, and deception. They've been doing it too long.
Right. No, that's the only thing that keeps them going. Absolutely. They can't admit fault. They're too deep.
They can never admit fault. They don't admit it once because then all the other lies and cover-ups fall apart. They can't admit error. They can't turn around. We've seen that with Obamacare. That's been an absolutely unmitigated disaster for everybody involved. They're still out there promoting it. There's already an investigation of corruption in the state exchanges. Same thing with human-caused global warming. The world has been getting colder for 13 years, and still they won't back off this screaming about, you icky-poo humans are warming the world, and you must pay a carbon tax to atone for it.
Oh shoot! But back to you have a whole bunch of people that'll go and fight about it, say how true it is, and still I don't know. It's sad.
People are brainwashed beyond belief.
Well, and that's what I mean.
It's starting to fall, though. It's starting to fall, though. I mean, trust arrives on foot, but departs on horseback. And you can take 100 years to build the trust of a people in its government, and one reckless, stupid lie, and it is gone, and it's not coming back. Saddam's nuclear weapons obviously being a big part of that. And it is. It's a bit of a... The government has a credibility problem of their own making, and I have no sympathy for them whatsoever.
Oh, none. I just you're a little more optimistic of people than myself. I still see just a lot of stupidity and ignorance and apathy. So
that's just because you've been witnessing the flat earthers the last couple of weeks, dude.
It's just because what?
The flat earthers.
The flat earthers. I've been dumbed down by the flat.
It's at least 5% of the population. They just hide in closets about it.
I've paid zero attention to that at all.
I try not to pay attention, but I don't know. I like science. I like physics. So when people start talking about that stuff and saying that, the space station isn't really up in orbit and we didn't go to the moon and all this stuff, like I can see people stating the case where maybe we faked some moon landings. But it's not like they weren't all faked. That's just
here's the deal. Okay, again, this gets back to the propaganda technique I mentioned called poisoning the well.
Yeah.
Where the government itself will put out this stuff and hope people will pick up on it because it makes us look ridiculous and discourages people from paying attention to more serious things here. Whether it's no plane at the Pentagon or fake Apollo moon landings, which is kind of a hard one to keep selling because those Apollo landing sites have now been imaged by spacecraft from other countries, some of whom aren't friendly with us, and they're not going to go along with the lie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've heard that NASA is the one who comes up with that fake moon landing theory.
I don't know who came up with it, but it was definitely put out there, along with, HAARP is a weather machine and chemtrails and all the rest of it. And it's all basically out there to make the general public think those of us in the independent media and the blogs are a bunch of nutcases.
Yep.
But with
at this point,
there's got to be some truth to a lot of that stuff. Like,
there doesn't have to be. It's from the U.S. government. It's total error.
I think a lot of it. I agree. A lot of it gets blown way out of proportion.
Yeah, like 99% of it.
But I think that a lot of that stuff is happening.
Well, we're going to disagree on that one, and I come from a position of experience because I actually worked on Apollo 12 post-mission.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
There you go.
I actually got to handle the remains of the Surveyor. Remember, Apollo 12 landed next to Surveyor 3, and they brought back pieces of it, which had been built at JPL, so they brought it back to us, and I got to actually, hold and touch and do proton luminescence studies on that stuff.
But I more meant, like you mentioned chemtrails, and I'm not saying necessarily that chemtrails, but that's I guess is what more that I was mentioning because you had mentioned that, and I mean I know that crowd seeding is real and that type of stuff.
I think it's the reasons why, like why they're doing it. Like I think like what I think is it's cloud seeding. I personally don't think they're dropping a bunch of poison on us to make us sick. That's my opinion. But I do think they are spraying something up there.
I have a wild theory about that, and it's too wild to tell.
Okay. Thank you for your discretion.
But really, if you look at, I think
I want to make that clear.
And if you look at chemtrails or contrails, they've existed for a long time. They really have. What's surprising about them is the amount of aluminum that's in it. And they say that HAARP, its aluminum serves as a good conductor. So HAARP can send its frequency waves around and transmits other people's minds.
Well, actually, I hate to spoil a good fairy tale here, but what HAARP actually is, and other countries have similar facilities, in the interval of time before surveillance satellites were really reliable and permanently up there, because, coming out of the Cold War era, a spy satellite would go up for only a few days, take a bunch of pictures, and then parachute back down with the film. And so there wasn't constant surveillance. So what HAARP is, or was a test bed for a synthetic aperture radar operating in the medium wave bands where they could bounce the beam off the ionosphere and image enemy ships and planes over the horizon. And they weren't able to really get it to work because the ionosphere is in constant motion. But basically, it's a lower frequency version of those synthetic aperture radars you see on the Aegis ships. And that was its real purpose. But, of course, they put out the story about its weather modification, its communicating with aliens, in order to keep people from not figuring out what's really going on. A lot of people think the Air Force mounted Project Blue Book to cover up the existence of alien spacecraft. What Project Blue Book was actually there to do was to give everybody the idea of alien spaceships, so that if you were out in the Nevada desert and you saw something flash overhead, you'd run around saying, I saw a flying saucer and an alien spaceship, and nobody would pay attention to you, when what you'd actually had seen was the SR-71, the U-2, Have Blue, Senior Citizen, the Aurora, or any of the other Black Project aircraft that are going on.
PR-3B, right.
Are you saying that you don't believe UFOs and aliens are real?
Okay.
I am absolutely convinced the universe is full of intelligent life. I just can't think of a reason for them to bother stopping by here.
Okay. So,
with all due apologies to Professor Stephen Hawking, what have we got that they would be interested in? When you drive down the when you drive down the highway, do you stop at every anthill you pass?
That's a good point.
What if the aliens are here to harvest us?
I imagine that we're probably as toxic to the aliens. I mean, Star Trek always had aliens looking like human beings because that saved money on the makeup and wardrobe. But we have life forms on this planet that if we eat them, we will die. And I don't think our biochemistries are going to prove to be all that compatible, where they're going to come down here and just open up the spaceship and walk around in spandex and beehive hairdos. They're going to have to be in environment suits. We're comfortable on Earth because we evolved here. The life forms down at the thermal vents in the bottom of the ocean are comfortable because they evolved down there. The fish in the Arctic in freezing water are comfortable there because that's where they evolved. Whatever is swimming around those methane pools on Titan is going to be very comfortable there because that's where they evolved. Every life form is going to be the product of the planet it evolved on, and unless we can actually find an exact duplicate of Earth somewhere, I don't think we're going to find life forms that are going to be compatible. There's not going to be a giant galactic United Nations where we're all sitting together in one room on comfy chairs.
Okay, so couldn't they just, as far as our toxins are concerned, couldn't they just put us in an infrared sauna for a couple weeks, clear out our toxins, and then eat us?
No, I'm not talking about the added toxins. I'm talking about the ones that are in there. Again, look at how much it costs to cross between stars in terms of energy. And remember, when you're in space, you can't just hit the brakes. If you're going from a star over there on the north to over on the south, and you want to stop at Earth, it doubles your energy costs. And there better be something down here that's worth all that trouble, not only to get here, but to lift whatever it is you want back up into space. It's not really practical, to be very honest. And I think probably any alien spaceships looking down on us from outside, they're going to see that our primary activity continues to be tribal warfare. And they're going to say, well, the heck with that thing. We go down there, we're going to get shot at. You know, I did a little cartoon once of a Klingon cruiser approaching Earth, and the crewman says, "Ready to launch our attack on planet Earth," and the Klingon captain says, "Nah, it's not worth it. Forget it."
Right. Right. They'll self-destruct on their own. They don't need our help.
It doesn't matter one way or the other. You know, it's just they're not worth the notice. Like I said, passing anthills on the highway.
That's true. There are standards of technology, but if we manage to exist and survive for 1 million years, we're going to have technology that can go fast. I would imagine faster than the speed of light, to the point where we might even be able to jump vast distances of space. So what about these UFOs that people are seeing? Is that just all government technology, you suspect?
I think I think it's government technology. It is honest mistakes of looking at stars. I remember when I was a kid living in West Covina, California, was a big news story about a UFO that was hovering over the San Bernardino Mountains. And I had built my first astronomical telescope, so I dragged it on over to where we could see it, and it turned out it was just an out-of-control weather balloon. And I've seen things in the sky that I don't know what they were, but they certainly weren't acting like they were under the control of anybody who was intelligent, or if they were doing some serious medication at the time. And let's be very honest, if somebody's going to spend all the money to come all the way here to planet Earth, they're probably going to treat us the way Columbus treated the North American natives.
Yeah.
Okay, so those times that I have seen UFOs, you know, I mean, one flew directly above, you know, took up the whole sky. I've said this on the show a few times. I'm guessing that could have been government technology, but my point is, could this be just other dimensional? Could there be some sort of beings on other dimensions or something?
Well, this is all getting to hypothetical speculation, and again, at this point, I am sure the universe is full of intelligent civilizations, far too intelligent to bother with us. I just don't see. I don't think we have anything to offer them. They can, you know, what was that? Aliens and cowboys. They're here to steal our gold. You can get a lot more gold out of the asteroid belt for a lot less cost.
Sure.
You know, they're going to take our water. Are you kidding? Water is one of the most abundant things in the entire universe. You don't need to come down here to steal the water. And maybe they'll come down here and say, "Give us Chuck Berry." Or something.
So I take it you definitely don't believe that Nibiru is going to pass next year.
I'm sorry?
I take it you definitely don't believe that Nibiru is going to pass next year.
No, I don't.
Nibiru.
Whatever they're going to call it. Planet X, the fantasy thing. I mean, they're always wagging that one around, and nobody comes up with any right ascension and declination coordinates where I can put my telescope on it. So there you go.
Fair enough.
Have you read
I had to get the crazy out of the way.
Work?
I'm sorry, there were two people talking at the same time.
Oh, I was asking if you've read Zachariah Sitchin's work.
No, I have not.
It's essential that we get the crazy out of the way.
Yeah,
the Earth Chronicles.
Yeah. No, I do like science fiction. I used to read a lot of science fiction. Foundation Trilogy, obviously, Ringworld, Larry Niven, the whole Dune series. I love those as well. But again, there's science fiction, and then there's science fantasy, and I stay on this side of the line with the stuff that's based on at least known theoretical possibilities right now, and that's my taste in science fiction. I wish somebody would make a movie out of Ringworld. I know a couple of people have tried, but Larry Niven has turned out to be, unfortunately, very difficult to deal with in terms of the licensing, the rights.
Okay. Well, I'm under the impression that, I mean, you're probably right about the aliens not coming here. I'm going to say that's most likely not what's happening, but I definitely believe there's something going on. Other dimensional beings.
Well, let me share one more piece of information with you, and then I know we're running out of time here. Astronomers talk about stars in terms of what is called population 1 and population 2 stars. And the difference between them is population 2 stars are almost nothing but hydrogen. And the population 1 stars are stars like our sun, where they have a lot of heavy elements which are necessary for life to evolve and obviously to have a technological base. Now, the numbers are inverted because the population 2 stars come first, and then when they go supernova, that's when the heavy elements are created. They're in your body. if you do a survey of our local area of the galaxy, it turns out our sun is pretty much the only population 1 star, and all the other stars around us are population 2, which means there are no heavy elements on which to base biochemistry and life. So we're actually the oldest, wisest civilization, at least in this part of town.
Mm. Yeah, I could definitely agree with that, yeah. Wow, okay, well...
Doesn't it make you feel proud?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah.
So what about another world mimicking ours, another galaxy?
Multiverse.
Well, I mean, in a universe as large as this, I mean, just out of random chance, yeah, there could be an exact copy of Earth someplace else out there. There might even be an exact copy of me. Heaven help them. But
right.
It's an interesting mathematical exercise. But I know that we've got a certain amount of species chauvinism going on in our search of other worlds for life, because we're looking for life as we know it on worlds just like ours, and I think that's too narrow a scope, because carbon-based chemistry with water as the mixing fluid, yeah, we know it works. We don't know for a fact that there's no other possibilities. I would very much like to see NASA send back a mission to Titan and see if there's anything swimming in those methane lakes, because that would be a truly alien form of life. And
right.
I'm still convinced that we did detect indigenous life on Mars with the Viking mission.
Really?
But, yeah, and it was the labeled release experiment by Dr. Gilbert Levin, and it showed a positive result, but there was a lot of politics going on. And to sort of put that in context, when Marco Polo came back from China to Europe, he was immediately grabbed and thrown into a dungeon by the church, because the church was afraid that if ordinary people found out there was another great civilization part of the East who had never even heard of Jesus, that it was going to undermine the authority of the church, which was presenting an image of, you know, we are universal, God is everywhere, Jesus is everywhere, we're in charge, so you do what we tell you. Fortunately, stories about what Marco Polo found leaked out, and eventually the church had to adjust and let him go. And I know that for a lot of people in positions of power in this country, confirmation of life on any of the other planets, however microbial and minor, would be a socially transformative event. We human beings might just decide to put down our weapons of war and to put down our greed and unite together and say, hey, let's go find out who's out there. And that, of course, is going to be a tremendous loss for those whose lives are based on greed and war. And I think for that reason, we were basically getting a lot of pressure on that mission to not say anything about life, even though most of us felt we'd proven indigenous life was there. And subsequent scientists looking at our raw data have said, yeah, this is the result you're supposed to get. I'm hearing all sorts of strange sounds on this feed.
Yeah, I'm hearing buzzing.
Yeah.
Someone's vibrating.
Yeah,
it's the NSA. That gosh darn NSA. They've got dirty, lowest bidder alligator clips on the wires.
I was just going to say, you'd think they get some better technology for Jesus.
Now, it's all cost plus anyway. So how are we doing on time?
Good question. Chris, you there, buddy?
Oh, no. I haven't checked my messages. He might have gotten booted.
No, I'm back. I didn't realize I was on mute. I'm sitting here talking, and I didn't realize you guys could
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
I was trying to figure out what that clicking was coming from. It was bugging me, so I was sending everybody messages like, what is that clicking? It's bugging me. Then I send the message to Michael, and then I hear, so that's Michael's phone.
Michael.
But anyway, we are coming to the end here, and it is almost break time. But awesome conversation, though. I didn't expect to talk about stuff that we just talked about, so that was awesome. And I know the listeners loved it. We seem to do good when we talk about that kind of stuff too.
Okay.
People like the conspiracy stuff. Yeah,
I had to talk about aliens. Sorry, keep it listeners
Yeah,
happy.
well, that's always good for like Jeff Rents and everything, who we're all, of course, hoping is going to recover fully from his accident.
Yeah.
But my website for 21 years is I stay away from that kind of stuff because I'm really about politics and peace and stopping this insane rush to war. And even though I personally love science, I stay away from some of that wilder stuff until I know for a fact that there's something actually there. And I'm probably one of the most skeptical people that you're going to meet in terms of some of these things. Well, like chemtrails and HAARP and so forth. So, I realize the truth is nowhere near as much fun, and I'm just a party pooper in a wet blanket. I'm sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay.
I'll go hide in the closet now.
I think you're a little optimistic about us becoming anti-war if we find life in the oceans of other planets, though. That I think we'll somehow justify that and just pretend it doesn't matter.
I would disagree, and it's not a case of being anti-war. It's just all of a sudden war not being the most important thing to us.
Right.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like Nikola Tesla said, peace is only a natural consequence of universal enlightenment.
All right.
Okay.
Breaking out the Tesla quote.
You remember that quote.
I love Tesla. Thank you.
I do too. Michael always seems to remember the quotes.
That's good, though. That's a good one.
Yeah, but I can't remember my cheat sheet for my final. God, I bombed that shit.
I never did. I was always good with the cheating. Never got caught once.
They got Tom Brady over here.
No. All right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Now we went from entertaining the fans to completely boring them.
Boring you. You're the only one that doesn't like talking about the stuff.
I'm the only one who doesn't like talking about Tom Brady's balls. Yes.
Sports in general. Anyway, Mike. Sorry. Great to have you on. Stop laughing, guy. Anyway, great to have you on. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Definitely, and if you want to plug anything right now, go ahead.
Well, just two things. First of all, my website, whatreallyhappened.com, and from there you can find your way to my talk radio show on GCN. But the most important thing for all of us right now is to find the courage to speak out about what's going on, about what we know, about our concerns that, hey, the government's now admitting that they lied at least in part about the raid that got bin Laden. And it's a shame the corporate media doesn't have the courage to take that next step and say, that wasn't really bin Laden anyway. They lied about Saddam's nuclear weapons. They lied about torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. They lied about Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. Lied about Lusitania not carrying weapons. When are you going to wake up and realize you live under a government that lies to you all the time? And once you make that recognition, what are you going to do about it? When you have the courage to speak out, you will give courage to those around you to speak out, and that is how public consensus will form.
Yep.
Well said.
I agree with that.
Well said.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you tonight, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And keep warm. Keep warm over there in Hawaii.
Oh, shit.
It's been warm here in Maine, so I can't complain.
Oh, I heard there were frost warnings up in the north part of the state last night.
It wasn't too bad last night. I got to keep my window open in my room, so it wasn't too bad.
No, mid-state's been fairly
all right. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and punch this little button.
Yep.
And say good night.
All right.
Got it.
All right,
I have to go on to something else now.
Have a good
care.
evening, Mike.
Thank you. Aloha.